Can you hear me? We'll go ahead and get started. See if other folks show up. If not, this will be a great crowd. Nobody wants to be this close, so I might have to come out to you. No, it's all right. I don't want to stand in the way of this table anyway. Okay, let's see if the clicker works. Hey, it works. Okay, great. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about me, about the topic we're going to talk about today, because, you know, the title, hopefully the part about hands-on discovery appealed to you, because the title is very cryptic, right? Dreams, rats, and stars. Like, what the heck is this about? And how do I go back to my company and tell them I went to this session and I got something out of it? I guarantee there will be very much hands-on, practical things that you can take back to your work, whether it's in product or in design, that you can take some tools. That's my goal today, is that we walk away with some very tangible tools that you can hopefully go back and apply to whatever part of product development that you work in. The session today will be focused mostly on building products. And it doesn't necessarily have to be software products. It could be physical products or other things. But in the development of products, discovery. How do we discover the right things to go after? If we've got limited time and resources, where do we apply them? And where do we want to, and how do we make decisions about that? And how do we convey that out to our partners and our leaders? Here's why we're prioritizing what we're prioritizing and what we're doing. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about, and the dreams, the rats, and the stars will be all part of that. They're just sort of a catchy way to do that. A little bit about me. So I lead the design group at Asurion. Asurion is a company you maybe haven't heard of. Maybe you have, and you've broken your phone. That's typically how people have heard of us. So if you have cell phone insurance from any of the major cell phone companies in the U.S., Verizon, AT&T, Sprint. If you happen to be from overseas, we have Telstra in Australia and Docomo in Japan and KPN in the Netherlands, a bunch of companies around the world who provide insurance for their customers through Asurion. So Asurion does all the back end, sort of white label it. We also have another product called Saludo, which less people have heard of yet, but more are. And it is a concierge tech support. So as more and more technology is coming out, people are confused about how do I connect my phone to my car, or how do I get my washing machine to talk to my home automation system. Saludo are our technicians that they're either on the call, they can do screen sharing, we have technicians that go out to people's homes and help them set things up. So that's another part of the business that's growing, and we're adding that on to the insurance. So if you buy insurance, you may say, hey, I've got all this new technology, or more often the case for a lot of folks, it's their parents. They're like, I do not want to be the tech support for my mom and dad anymore. And so I'm going to buy them this Saludo service, and if they have a problem, like, call up Saludo. Those guys will take care of you. They'll answer your questions. They'll come out and help you set stuff up. So, yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. It's proving very, very popular, and it's being sold sort of through the insurance. So you buy the insurance, and it's an add-on, typically. It's not a standalone product right now. So less people have heard of Saludo. You may hear of things like Total Tech Protection for Verizon or AT&T Protect. These are all sort of the brand names that it goes under. Needless to say, we have a team of 28 designers. They're all called designers, but there's specialty skill sets in that team. We have content strategists. Everyone on the team is a designer. But we also have prototypers who are dedicated to helping build prototypes, A/B testing, leads. I also have a discovery lead who helps do a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. Even within our team, we're constantly battling, how do we do better discovery? How do we find the right problems to go after instead of just the most convenient? The ones that feel like, oh, well, this executive said this, we should just go do it. I mean, we've all been there, and it's a natural tendency. So I have somebody on my team we've designated as a discovery coach, and he goes out and runs design sprints, helps the designers to use design thinking methodology in their work. So are they actually gaining empathy for the customers? Are they defining the problems they're trying to solve before they go after trying to come up with a solution? So we'll talk more about that. I do a lot of cycling. You'll probably see me on the road. I did about 10,000 miles last year. Pretty stoked about that. I'm hoping to do another 10,000 this year. I do long distance cycling. So the guys who are riding out all day, all night across the U.S. and things like that, those are the folks that I ride with and aspire to try to fit that in with the day job and the family. I do have a couple kids. I have a couple daughters. My older daughter is a harpist. She loves playing the harp, and so we were back in Virginia this year, in Richmond. There was a harp camp, and she's out there, so I was with her. We went to Monticello, and then I have a 3-year-old who's a monster, and she's proud of it. And so there's a big gap between my 2 kids, but they're a lot of fun. What else? That's about it. Yeah, I'm on. I used to put on like my Twitter handle and things like that, and I just don't spend a lot of time on Twitter, so I'm just not doing that anymore. You can connect with me on Strava if you use Strava. You can get me by email, and you can get me on the Utah Product Slack channel. I'm there, and I say this very seriously. Please feel free to contact me afterwards if you're like, hey, that was really interesting. I'd love to learn more about it. Or there was some slide or I will put the slides up, by the way, in the Slack channel for this, so you'll have access to the slides. But I'm happy to chat. I'm always willing to come and visit your team and spend a half hour on a video conference or just shoot the breeze if you've got questions and things to talk about. I mean that very seriously. I really enjoy that. So I kind of make up for my lack of social media through actual face-to-face interactions, and I value that. So enough about me. What I'd like to do, and you guys were already talking and getting started chatting with one another, I'd like to take that the next step, and I'd like you to pair off and to talk a little bit about things you've always wanted to do. Just share a couple things that you're like, these are things that I've always wanted to do. I've got some primers here. These guys are climbing Everest. This guy's like hopefully writing a book, maybe visiting all the ballparks, going to the Eiffel Tower, whatever. What are the things you've always wanted to do? This is getting into, we're going to dive headlong into these sort of dreams and wishes. What are things we aspire and want to do? So find somebody at your table, hopefully somebody you haven't met before, or just met this morning, and get a chance. You might have to mix up, guys, if you know each other already. Talk just for a few minutes and find out from the other individual what's something that they've always wanted to do. Let's take just a few minutes for you guys to do that. Great. Well, these are all some fantastic aspirations. Hopefully, give you a chance to learn a little bit about the people around you. Apart from just getting to know one another, which is important because this is going to be very much a working session, we will stop. We will actually do hands-on stuff and practice what we're talking about today. It won't be all just me talking. And so that's important to get a chance to know each other. But also, I really wanted to, are you okay? I'm worried about the light. Okay. Yeah, the sun blasting people in the eyes. Hopefully it's going to keep rising. I also want to, there's Christ. I want to put the point across that no matter who you interact with, they have aspirations for something, except for Jeff. I'm just constantly dying. This will be a recurring joke that only this group will get. So everybody has certain things that they aspire to. even if it's just getting through the day. There are certain things that people aspire to and want to achieve, and it's important that we recognize that there are individuals around us who have these aspirations that they're driving toward, and if we can help one another in that process, I have found that is the key to being able to accomplish your own objectives. If you are actively looking around and seeing how can I align the things that I'm trying to achieve with those around me who have like or similar or somehow supportive objectives, those things, that power has the way to get through some of the challenges you face, whether in a professional or in a personal capacity. That is really important. So I wanted to just put that out there. As we talk a little bit about dreams, I wanted to make a distinction here. The dreams I'm talking about are not the kind you have when you're sleeping. That's not what we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about dream interpretation. We're not going to talk about anything like that. I'm talking about dreams as in objectives, things that we are trying to realize, wishes, things that we are trying to achieve. And again, everyone has those things that they're trying to achieve, and those may change over time. There are sort of big things and long-term objectives, and then there's small, daily things that we're trying to accomplish. Hey, I want to get my tasks done on my to-do list today. What are those to-dos? How do I accomplish that? I want to talk a little bit about optimism. So with all of these wishes and dreams that people have, there's a certain level of optimism that goes along with that. And that's important. If you were not optimistic about the future at all, you wouldn't even have those aspirations. You were like, it's not possible. If you're completely pessimistic about the possibility of it, they don't even come to the surface because you just dismiss them as they're not even possible. So with all of those things that we talked about here, there's a certain level of optimism within you that says, I could do that. I could bobsled and live. I could accomplish the Ironman, or I can go travel to these places. You have that belief that that's possible. There's a couple different types of optimism. There's the positive expectations based on past experience. So you've done something in the past. Maybe you've accomplished, you didn't quite run an Ironman, but you've hiked a certain distance, and you said, okay, well then I can do a little bit more. Or you've traveled somewhere that gave you a taste of something that you want more of. Or you've had a vacation for a certain amount, and then you said, you know what, I'd like to really extend that. How do I do that? That's the type of optimism that's based on past experience. And then there's the optimism that's thoughts and images, hopes and desires. You have no past experience that says this is possible. It's this like dream out there that you're trying to pursue, but you've got really no way of knowing whether you're going to accomplish that or not. Both of these are valid, but I would submit that optimism motivates you to action, but it doesn't do much else. That optimism, whether either one of them, it will get you going. It's sort of like the starter on a car. It gets things moving, but it won't actually get you to the accomplishment of those objectives. That optimism alone, whether it's even based on your past experience or on your future hopes, it's not enough to make it happen. So let's take some examples here. There's a very faint image of a brain back there, but that's okay. The sunlight's getting us all. Let's take a piece of chocolate cake. Let's look at how optimism and how these hopes and aspirations can play tricks on the mind. So there's been some really interesting research lately, psychology research, around people who imagine, this might sound counterintuitive, that you imagine you're eating something. You've imagined and you really try to think, okay, what's it like to eat this chocolate cake? What does that taste like? That you can actually satiate yourself if you think about it enough and you think positively about it. And it might actually mean you get less actual consumption. So you actually consume less because you're thinking about it, and your brain almost, it doesn't recognize necessarily the difference between actually doing it and you're imagining doing it. The same neural triggers are firing in the brain as if you are actually eating it. So you can actually satiate yourself to some extent and consume less. So that's a good thing. That's a great way to kind of fool the mind. Let's look at another example. Let's imagine you're a soccer player and you imagine you're kicking it into the goal perfectly every time. This has been the classic line of thought for years now around sports, has been imagine yourself hitting the ball perfectly or kicking it in perfectly. What they've found is completely opposite. What it actually does is actually causes folks to prepare less for or have the ability to cope with things don't go perfectly like they imagined it. So their preparation, again, the mind is thinking, hey, we just accomplished it. That was easy. I'll just keep imagining it, and I'm doing it, and it's easy. Okay. Well, when you get out into the real world, and a blocker comes up and throws you off, and you're unprepared for how to deal with that, and you don't kick it in, then there's this reality slap in the face that occurs. And the psychology around positive thinking is that in certain cases there can be value there, right? Satiating, kind of putting off the things that you don't want to occur. But in preparation for performance, it doesn't help. It's actually detrimental. Let's take the example, a work example, a little more applicable. So if you work in the software development industry, which I imagine a lot of you do, but hopefully in some sort of product development, let's imagine, the common case. You probably see this at companies you work at. Okay, what does successful product launch look like? What is it? Let's look at perfect launch. Everything's perfect. We expect it to be perfect, completely ignoring what challenges may come into play. Maybe not completely, but a lot of companies will say, okay, we've kind of covered all the bases. What's a successful launch going to look like? Well, you actually might prepare less for the actual risks that are going to come or the challenges that you might face in that launch. And again, it's a mind trick. Your mind is of this, you can kind of actually get to a point where you're convincing it, and a little bit of groupthink as well, where the group believes, hey, we've prepared, we've done everything we need to do, and you get into a launch situation and you're putting a product out there, and then you go, whoa, wait a minute, maybe we didn't do as much, we weren't as prepared as we thought. Have others had experience with this? Have you seen this in reality? Yeah. There's all kinds of social dynamics that go involved in companies too, that you see where certain, whether it's financial or whether it's, expectations that they have for certain levels of success, they'll put off the risk. When you see that behavior, when you see that folks are avoiding risk and they're skewing toward spinning the positive spin, red flag. Red flag. Watch out for that. A lot of this research came from Gabrielle Ottingen, who is a professor. She's a dual professor. She's of German descent. She teaches at university in Germany, but she also teaches at NYU. And she put out a book last year, maybe the year before, called Rethinking Positive Thinking. This is a really interesting book, and a lot of these her fundamental researches have been around motivation, and when she first came out, 10, 12 years ago with this idea that positive thinking does not actually help you prepare for reality, she was completely running against the common thought. Like at the time, every sports, professional sports team was like employing psychologists to do like positive thinking exercises with their athletes. And her research kept pointing toward, and she was not looking at athletics at first, she was looking at goals and goal aspirations. So people like doing dieting or exercise. And she was finding that positive thinking alone was not actually helping. It was actually negative. When people didn't prepare for the challenges that they were going to face, they were less successful in accomplishing those goals. So she came up with this technique or this mnemonic device called WHOOP, which I think it's because English is a second language. Because when she says WHOOP, my first thought was, if you remember, this is probably too old for some people, but the Newlywed Game. Remember that, where they would say they're making whoopee? Like, that's what I originally thought. Anyway, that's where my head went. You get into the deep thoughts for mine. So let's talk about the WHOOP, though. It's a good mnemonic device. You won't forget it now. Wish, outcome, obstacle, and plan. So after a bunch of different research studies, first, again, starting with diet and exercise, and then she started to branch out into all kinds of different things and apply this. So wish, it's important to have that wish. Again, this is the starter engine. This is what gets you going. If you don't have an aspiration for something, you really can't get there. So it's important. I don't want to discount dreams and wishes. They're important to get you going, and they give you it gives you something to shoot for. The outcome. So what's the best thing that comes from that? It's important to think about what's the best outcome. And in some ways, for me, this is analogous to define in the design thinking process. So defining what is the outcome we expect to have happen here? What's the positive outcome that we expect to come about? And we're pretty good about this. Most companies are pretty good about this. You know, you have the Amazon write your press release before you start building the product kind of thing. It's like, here's what success is. And that's, again, if you only go that far, you're halfway there. The important part, I think, is the second half. The important obstacle, so what holds you back? What poses the greatest risk to that being successful? This is where you start to get into that pessimist mindset. And I would put forward that really successful products have some good pessimists in the group. The folks, and you know them, they're probably like in your QA department or your testing department. They're like, the sky is falling, this thing is going to burn, we got to fix this problem. So you got to temper it, right? But at the same time, you want those people. You want those people in the organization, and you want to, I think, encourage within yourself this thinking about what could go wrong. Because what goes on, again, you're tricking your mind a little bit. Because if you go through the scenario of all the things that could go wrong, let's take a big event. Maybe you're going to do some sort of athletic event. It's a run, a race, or a bicycle race, or whatever. If you think about, okay, I got a flat tire. Oh, my chain breaks. My cable breaks, my shoe, won't latch up, or, I run out of water. You think about all these different things, and you maybe even list them out. Here are all the things that could go wrong. And if you think through those in your mind, you go down to this next step of plan. What can you do to overcome each of those obstacles? Again, now your mind is prepared. So when those eventualities may come, oh, you run out of water. Okay, I know exactly what to do. I've already thought this through. I've already planned for this. I anticipated this, actually. This doesn't throw me off. I know what I'm going to do when this challenge comes because I've already planned for it. And then the other benefit is if you're looking at lots of different challenges, you actually can say, only one thing went wrong. I have had contingency plans for 30 different issues. Only one? That's easy. The one challenge does not become insurmountable anymore because you were anticipating lots more. You were anticipating lots more, and your mind is prepared and anticipating all these things that could go wrong. You are much better. The momentum to accomplish your goal. A lot of motivation and a lot of goal accomplishment has to do with momentum. right? You can get started. It's this new time of year. Everybody's got their goals they're setting. You get the momentum going, but it's hard to sustain it. This technique and thinking through the risks, thinking through the challenges, having plans for those challenges helps to keep that momentum going. In fact, it actually springs it forward to a greater degree because you start to go, this is not as challenging as I anticipated it would be, and I'm going to accomplish it. So let's think a little bit about this within a product organization. So we've got, at Asurion, we've, over the last year and a half, we've been going through a transition from more of an agile feature shop where we're building features based on client requests. We've really made a transition, and I think a lot of companies out there are making this transition to dedicated teams, small teams with full stack capability. So we've got product leader, designer, technical lead, and then a development staff that are aligned with them. We call them journey teams at Asurion, but they're also called squads in the Spotify model. And they're these small teams, and we call them journey teams because we align them to the customer journey. So we actually, as we develop a team, we think about what is the portion of the customer journey that this team is aligned to. And they know that going into it. You are focused on the search capability, the search experience, or onboarding. You got the first 30 days. Your team is responsible for it, and here's your KPIs that you need to go drive. So we've been going through that transition. We've got about 20 journey teams right now. We still have a few teams that are like what we call get it done teams, and those are still taking feature requests, and they're still helping with the client stuff. So it's not a 100% transition for the company, but we're aspiring to have more of our product development to be based on the customer journey and the customer needs, and less on what the latest client request is, executive mandate, whatever. So these teams have, I think they have a KPI, but I think they've often struggled with discovery. And one of the challenges has been maintaining momentum, right? They get started, everybody's excited, we're going to get going, and how are we going to accomplish this? And so we found this teaching them and talking to them about, do you have a plan? What are the challenges you're currently facing, and how are you planning to be able to articulate as a team? What are our contingency plans when we run into dependencies with this back-end group that doesn't work in our model? They're holding us up, so we can't do our releases. Okay, that's fine to have challenges. Everybody does. But what are your plans? What are your plans to mitigate those? And then also really trying to push them toward contingency planning of things that haven't gone wrong yet but might go wrong. Are you thinking through that as a team? So it starts with the leadership, the key three of the product manager, the designer, and the tech lead. They need to share that with the rest of the group, but they need to have it within themselves. So when we talk to them about this, plans and what are you aspiring to accomplish, these are typically your KPIs, their wish. The outcomes is, okay, here's their press release, here's the successful product launch. The obstacles, well, here's all the things that could go wrong. And we're not talking just about the features, people don't like them, the customers don't like them, but internal issues of coordination or technology challenges or infrastructure, those type of things as well. And have contingency plans to prepare for those. It also empowers leadership to be able to go and say, let me go take that challenge for you. I'll take that one. I'm going to bust through the walls and make that happen. Go ahead. No, the way it's happening is more is at a leadership level. So as we go and visit with these teams and we're getting updates on how they're progressing, it's more of like a spot check of, it's not a formal thing like do this every time. It's more of a, hey, can you answer these questions? And if you can't, then you're probably not doing it on an ongoing basis. So you need to just start doing more of it. And it helps sometimes with those key three to be able to identify maybe one of them has a tendency to be more of the Chicken Little, sky is falling person, and like you do that for us. Like, you know, it doesn't mean everybody has to do all the jobs. You can kind of divide and conquer. Yeah, and it depends on the team, right? I think there's flexibility within the team to say these different personalities, different tendencies, teams can handle it differently. Are there questions about that? Okay. So this is tool number 1, and we'll come back to this. We'll talk a little bit more about this today. I should mention too, we will take a couple breaks, I promise. We're going to have a kind of a big push here at the beginning, and we'll get through a couple different things. We'll take a break. If you need to step out, feel free. I should mention that. But we will take a couple breaks. Okay, so that's tool number 1. And I think along with this sort of whoop analysis is there's this overarching theme or important skill set that goes along with this, is being able to focus on the problems at hand. So I just want to, it's important to be able to think about those detailed issues, those specific problems that can occur. But what I try to share with the teams I'm meeting with, you handle those. Be very focused on accomplishing what are those challenges that you're facing. At the same time, try to maintain a sense of context of that problem. Don't get paralyzed by the individual, discrete challenges that you're facing. Everybody has them. You may not be able to anticipate and accomplish all of them, but don't lose context of the broader objectives for the organization. I see this all the time where a designer on my team will get really hooked up on one problem on the interface, and they're like, we've got to get this right. It's got to get right. And to the extent where they don't recognize that it's more important to get into the market and launch the product than it is to fix that one problem. And that's a hard lesson to learn. But that's the balance between understanding and really being passionate about solving the individual challenges, the details. Don't lose that context, but at the same time, don't maintain a sense of context of the bigger whole. Don't get run over by that train. Nothing worse than focusing on the minutia when your executive comes in and says, we've missed the market. Our competitors have come in and beat us because we were focused on so many of the little details. That's a hard lesson. But if you do whoop too much, right? If it paralyzes you and doesn't allow you to be able to launch, that's I think you've got to balance those out. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about that as well. All right, so that's tool number 1. I want to jump over to the next tool. We're going to jump into the dreams. That was dreams. This is stars. So we're going to talk a little bit about the 11-star experience. And I don't know if it's by design it was 11 stars or if it really does have to do with Spinal Tap. But I like the reference, and it's always a great way. When we do these, I'll do these. This is actually a practical exercise. This 11-star exercise is something that I've actually sat down with leadership teams, product teams. We've actually gone through this exercise, and it's really helpful for starting to push outside of it. If you find that your teams are maybe stuck in a certain, like, we have to accomplish it a certain way. This is how our product works, and there's just no way to get out of it. This is a helpful exercise to start thinking, a little bit beyond what the current capability is. So let's talk a little bit about stars. Again, I mentioned we had these journey teams. A lot of times when we first start up, they have a KPI. Okay, you need to get initiations up to this level. We're currently here, you need to get them here. That's pretty straightforward. But they will have like 1 or 2 ideas that have been sitting on the shelf for a long time, and so they'll go execute and test that. Those work sometimes, and sometimes they don't. And then the teams are sort of left with this we've got like all these different ways we could go, all these different things we could test. And I've found a lot of these teams are almost paralyzed by which direction should we go? Which ones are the most important? Which are the, I don't know which one to do. I got all these things. Maybe we'll do a little bit of each, which is not the way to go. It's like going 5 steps one way and go 5 steps the next way, and you never go anywhere. So 11 star actually came from this. It came from Airbnb. I don't know if have anyone heard of this Airbnb 11 star? There was a podcast, Masters of Scale, May this year. So the founders of Airbnb talked a little bit about how early days. It's a really interesting podcast because you love to hear about the early days. They were part of Y Combinator, which is Yahoo's incubator. And they were East Coast guys, but Y Combinator is famous for saying, you've got to come to Silicon Valley. You've got to come here. And they use that as sort of a vetting tool, a weeding tool to say, if you're really serious about your startup, you're willing to pick up your life and move. And so these guys were coming, they came out to Silicon Valley, having Y Combinator help them to figure out how to scale this business of getting people to share their houses. And, imagine this was, not that many years ago, but people were like, I'm not going to let somebody come into my house. That's crazy. Like, it was not the norm that it is today. So this is a pretty crazy idea at the time. And they were struggling a little bit. They had a little bit of success in New York City. Like, their biggest base was New York City. And he talks about this in the podcast. He says, we had a little bit of success in New York City. And at the time, they were in Silicon Valley because Y Combinator told them to come there. And then once they got there, they said, well, why are you here? Your customers are in New York. You need to go to New York. So what they were doing is they were literally back and forth across the country every week. They would spend 2 days with Y Combinator in Silicon Valley, and then they would fly back to New York and spend time with their customers. In the early days, they talked about they didn't even know what the concerns of the users were. And so they were actually posing to say, hey, can we help you get a better listing? We're going to come photograph. So the founders of the company had a camera, and they were actually going and knocking on people's doors and saying, can we help photograph your home so that you can have a better listing and more people will likely come and rent. So that's how they were doing user research early days and meeting their customers. They were actually going and shooting the photographs for every, room and house that they were renting out. This was early days. So coming out of this, they learned a lot about what the customers liked, what they didn't like, what the hosts were able to do. They came with a lot of knowledge. So again, they've done a lot of empathy research. If you follow design thinking methodology, they've done a lot of the empathy. They're moving into this define phase. Okay, what should we accomplish? I'm going to play just a clip, a 2-minute clip from this podcast where he walks through the 11-star experience and what this exercise was like for them. And, it kind of makes sense with a travel business. They have those star ratings, and they were thinking about, okay, what's an 11-star experience for Airbnb? That's how this kind of starts off. So this is the founders Airbnb talking about this.
If you want to build something that's truly viral, you have to create a total mind experience that you tell everyone about. And so we basically took one part of our product and we extrapolated what would a 5-star experience be, and then we went crazy. So a 1, 2, or 3-star experience is you get to your Airbnb and no one's there. So you knock on the door, they don't open, that's a 1-star. Or maybe it's a 3-star if they don't open, you have to wait 20 minutes. And if they never show up and you're pissed and you need to get your money back, that's a 1-star, you're never using this again. So a 5-star experience is you knock on the door, they open the door, they let you in. Great, that's not a big deal. You're not gonna tell every friend about it. You might say, I used Airbnb, it worked. So we thought, what would a 6-star experience be? A 6-star experience, you knock on the door, the host opens, hey, I'm Reed, welcome to my house. You're the host in this case. And you would show them around, and on the table would be a welcome gift. It would be a bottle of wine, maybe some candy. You'd open the fridge, there's water, you go to the bathroom, there's toiletries, and the whole thing is great. That's a 6-star experience. And you'd say, wow, I love this more than a hotel. I'm definitely going to use Airbnb again. It worked better than I expected. What's a 7-star experience? Knock on the door. Reid Hoffman opens. Get in. Welcome. Here's my full kitchen. I know you like surfing. There's a surfboard waiting for you. I've booked lessons for you. It's going to be an amazing experience. And by the way, here's my car. You can use my car. And, I also want to surprise you, but I got you, this is the best restaurant in the city of San Francisco. I got you a table there. And you're like, whoa, like this is way beyond.
Adding stars clearly excites Brian. It took some time to run through this mental exercise. We'll skip ahead to the 10-star experience.
So what would a 10-star check-in be? A 10-star check-in would be the Beatles check-in in 1964. I'd get off the plane, and there'd be 5,000 high school kids cheering my name with cars welcoming me to the country. I'd get to the front yard of your house, and there'd be a press conference for me. And I would be just a mind experience. So what would an 11-star experience be? I would show up to the airport, and you'd be there with Elon Musk, and you're saying you're going to space. The point of the process is that maybe 9, 10, 11 are not feasible, but if you go through the crazy exercise of keep going, there's some sweet spot between they showed up and they opened the door, and I went to space. That's a sweet spot. And you have to almost design the extreme to come backwards. Suddenly doesn't just like having like knowing my preferences and having a surfboard in the house seem like not crazy and reasonable. It's actually kind of crazy logistically. But this is the kind of stuff that creates great experience.
But how?
All right. So that's the setup for the 11-star experience. I think the key thing, and what we're going to do today, is we're going to go through this exercise, an 11-star experience, and run it. Typically, this is, so here's the setup. Sometimes you'll need sticky notes, and I brought giant sticky notes for 11. You can use the smaller ones for 11. You need participants that are your truth sayers in the organization. You know, those sort of firebrands, the people who just don't care. We had this guy who had some rough life experiences. He was pretty much a truth sayer before, but then he had some traumatic life experiences in his life. And he came back and he was just like, I don't care. I don't, whatever. You can fire me. I don't know, whatever. He would just lay out the truth in any meeting. This is BS. I don't know what you guys are talking about. And just because he had that little bit of like crazy about him. Those are the people you want in the room for this 11-star experience. So if you're thinking about using this tool to try to develop sort of where could we go, where could we vision, get those crazy, the slightly crazy ones, and the people who are not afraid to say things that make other people uncomfortable. Get a few of those in the room. If you get a bunch of people who are all sort of toeing the line, you're probably going to struggle with the 11-star part of it. But if you get the people who are out there just saying, well, this is whatever, I'll just tell you what I think, and that starts to free up the whole group. The whole group goes, well, if he's going to say that, well, then I'm going to say something else. So get some truth sayers in the room. Usually about 90 minutes. So we've been doing design sprints. Last time I spoke at Front, we went through design sprints and how we run design sprints. If you haven't run design sprints, talk to me. I'd love to talk with you about it. They've been very helpful, but they're 5 days, and we're pretty strict about that. Like we get all this all the time. Like, can you do a 3-day design sprint? Can you do a 2-day design sprint? No, sorry. 5 days. It's a little bit like Y Combinator. If you're not willing to put in 5 days, then you don't care enough about this problem. Like the 5 days is like this. We may not use the full 5 days, but we use this as a vetting tool to say, are you really committed? Do you really want to do this? Then 5 days is really not that much to ask. Anyway, so this is a technique, though, for groups who are, hey, we want some ideas. So we were finding that people were coming and saying, hey, we need new ideas for this team. We got this team, and they're struggling to figure out what to do, like where to go. Can we do a design sprint? And we were like, well, if they don't really know where they're going, we could do a design sprint, but there's probably some other techniques. This 90 minutes is very palatable for leadership, for teams that are like, okay, yeah, we can do an hour-and-a-half meeting. That seems reasonable. The bit of a secret though is that 90 minutes, once you get them started, 90 minutes is going to be hard, and they're probably going to want to carry on afterwards, which is great, perfect. That's what you want them wanting more after this 90-minute session. Say, great, let's schedule another session next week. As a team, you guys take and continue to vet down your 11-star experience and really get crisp on this. But 90 minutes is palatable for most people. They can fit it into their schedule, whereas a design sprint, a lot of people are just like, I can't do that. I can't find the time to do it. So this is a start of a conversation. There will more likely come out of it. What we're going to do today is I think we should take, let's kind of form up in 4 tables here. So you two come back, hopefully not blinded by the light. We're gonna form up into 4 tables, and we're gonna do an 11-star experience. And what we're gonna do it on, because I'm sure you're all from different companies, different products, what we're gonna do it on is the ideal conference experience. We're all conference attendees. What does an 11-star conference look like? So we're going to walk through how you do this. And this is the same kind of setup you would do if you're running one of these at your company. So go ahead and find your groups, get congregated. I'll talk through this a little bit. Okay, so imagine you're running one of these sessions. Imagine you're running one of these sessions in your company. You're facilitating. What you want to do is talk a little bit about the 11-star experience. You can share that clip. It's a great little clip to kind of go, oh, that's the kind of crazy we're talking about here. Or you can talk through it, and hopefully as you get a track record in your company, you can start to use them as references, right? You can start to say, hey, well, this team down here that's working on search, they came up with this crazy idea of like, you search, and next thing you know, you materialize the product in their hand. Like that's crazy sci-fi 11-star experience. Anyway, you can use those experiences, but if you don't have that yet, if you're just starting out, use the video clip or use the audio clip from this podcast, talk through so they go, oh, okay, we're talking about go to space kind of 11-star. Give them that content. So step 1, explain what the 11-star is. They're going to start thinking about 11 right off the bat. What is the 11? But the reality is they don't know what 11 is yet. Start with where you are today. Try to define what's the star rating of our product experience today, why, and how do we know this? So if you take the 11 as your band, you have a good debate. So let's talk a little bit about your conference experience and so far at front. Where is it today on the 11-star scale? And we've got some sun issues here. So that's gonna probably affect our star rating. But have a good debate as a team. Put it on your sticky notes. So you'll take your sticky notes here, the big ones or little ones if you'd like, and put a star on it. You can put 5, 6. Grab a scribe, and you can do this as a group. You can do this as a table. You don't have to do it individually. You can do it as a table. So talk amongst yourselves about what is this star experience? Is this a 5-star conference experience? Is this a 4? Is it a 3? Why do we think it's that? Okay. Hopefully you've got your current where we're at today. Put a stake in the ground. Within your own company, people are passionate about this, right? Especially if you've got some senior leaders in there and they're like, what? The team thinks we're a 3-star? This is a problem. We've got a big problem here. But you need the truth sayers to say, this is, this is where we're at. The next part, we're going to go down, we're going to work our way down the line. This is also typically very easy for people. They know the faults. They say, okay, well, let's, happy path, yes, I would agree we're whatever, 4-star, 3-star, 5, whatever. Now what happens when things go south? Okay, let's just start listing off the things. Okay, the product never shows up on their doorstep. They get 4 or 4 pages. They get all kinds. What are the error states? And typically, organizations are very familiar with this. And once you get the ball rolling, people start going, "Oh yeah, well, what about this guy? Remember that guy who, this issue that came up? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, that's a 1-star experience." So you kind of go down and say, okay, what are some of the things that are like the bad experiences. And maybe, this is why we use sticky notes, because that may cause you to adjust and say, oh, wait a minute, that's really bad. Maybe the current experience is, we thought it was a 4, maybe it's a 5, So you can move your sticky notes. So you're not locked in, but you go down the line now. So start your team, and if you're facilitating this, what makes this experience subpar? How often does this occur, and what causes it? Sort of list those things out. And I get that we're doing this around a conference, so it's a little tricky, but you can kind of start to say, okay, the food wasn't so good. Maybe there's some of the things you listed out that were some of your negatives, and those become the points of this is a 1-star experience if this is how you experience the conference. So start going down the line, trying to get down to a 1-star experience. What is a 1-star? Somebody who would leave this conference and say, that was a 1-star conference. You can, yes, and I should mention, you can use the walls if you need room, if you need to spread out for your 11 spaces. Go ahead and just post them up and move down the line. We'll go ahead and take 15 minutes for that. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to focus in on some of the down experience. Okay. You'll get more chance. Trust me, we're not done. Let me walk through the next portion of this. So again, you're going to have to, as you're facilitating this session with your company, they're going to kvetch over the negativity, all about it, and you're going to have to draw them back out and say, okay, we're going to go the other direction. Don't worry, because at this point, people are feeling pretty low. This product, people are checking LinkedIn right now. Whoa, I got to find something else. This ship is going down. So step 3, you start to say, okay, wait a minute. What's the possibility? Now you start going up the line. And I would actually say start at the top. What is that 11-star experience? What would that look like? Now we've seen all this negative. What's the peak? What's going to happen here, though? You're going to shoot for the peak and give everybody an opportunity to participate. This is important, that you really make sure that everybody in your group has a chance to participate. There's a bunch of people typically in an organization who, for whatever reason, don't talk. They don't talk. They'll talk after the session. They'll go back to their team, their small team, or their cube person next to them and say, well, this is what I really think. And you want to get that in the room. So as a facilitator, really look around and say, have we heard anything from these guys? We're doing 4. So I don't have that luxury of being able to see who's participating in your team, but So look around and say, oh, what do you think about this? Get them engaged, particularly on the 11-star experience. What do they think and you'll find, I've seen this time and time again, the people who have been sort of quietly thinking, they'll come out with the craziest 11-star, and you're like, whoa, I did not know that was in there. And again, this is where sticky notes are really important, because what the original 11-star experience is, typically you'll get the people who are boisterous and say, here's what I think the 11-star is. I've got, the executive types. They want to lay it out. Here it is. Everybody agree with me. And inevitably, that will become number 8, because they're thinking feasibility, reality of what we can do today, and that sort of pushes down into the 8 zone. The 11 gets into that's crazy. That's going to take some new sort of sci-fi technology to accomplish that. But it's good to have those aspirations to say, because honestly, 20 years ago, who would have thought you'd have as much computing power on your cell phone that you do today? I don't think very many people had that vision of what was possible. So you may find that you go back and say that 11-star actually starts to become feasible. And it's important for companies to think in that direction, to aspire to it. So start at the top. And then what you'll do is you'll start to push your way down. So we're just going to take 10 minutes. And you may find that you've got a bunch of 11s. That will feed into the next, which is filling in those gaps between where you currently are and where the 11s are. And you'll fill in that gap. Any questions so far? Okay. This has been great dialogue. I've heard some great conversations. I realize this is a bit of extrapolation. You've been at the conference for 2.5, 3 hours now. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this conference particularly, but conferences in general. In your own company, you guys are going to know the product. People are going to be passionate about it. They're going to know about the features. Here's what's on our roadmap. You're going to see people in this stage try to put their pet agenda item into the 11th star. And typically those pet agenda items of like, hey, I want to get this feature built, are not 11 star. They're more like a 6. They're like an incremental step from where you are today. So just watch for that. And don't let that become your 11 star, something that's incremental. You want it to be like really out there. So take 10 minutes and really start to think, what's out there as in a conference experience. Going to keep us on schedule. We're going to, you don't, just listen up. Here's the sort of final phase. We'll just finish up. We got 15 minutes to finalize this. And what you're going to do is take your 11 and fill in the gaps. So between 11 and where you are today, hopefully you've already started to kind of think some of those things get pushed. What used to be an 11 star maybe becomes a 10 or a 9. You start pushing them down. So keep topping those ideas and pushing them down. And just fill in the gaps. So look across the entire span and adjust your 11 stars. You may have to adjust your lower end as well. Okay, let's go ahead and sit down. I want to talk a little bit about this. Talk about the exercise. So this is typically pretty hard to get people to stop, right? Their minds are rolling now. Like, oh my goodness! Now that the executives are excited. Okay, there's the LinkedIn profiles are closed and everybody's back. So I'd love for each of the teams to kind of walk through. We don't have time to go through each of these. One of the big takeaways that we found after doing these exercises is documenting it. So making sure that there's some way to keep this alive for the team. Somehow, whether that's photographs or a board that they keep up, and they keep this as something that they refer to, and it becomes sort of the hidden language of the team. Remember, you'll talk about, yeah, that's like a skydiving, what you're talking about there. Or, that's like a helicopter ride, what you're talking about, that feature. It becomes like shorthand for 11 star means, wow, that's like super hard, but let's go for it. But it helps to draw the team together too in the experience of doing this. So, as a kickoff tool, it's really good to get folks aligned together. It's a good starting tool. If you don't have time to do a full design sprint or something, this is a great way to get them tied together. I'd love for each of the teams to kind of just talk a little bit about what are some of the takeaways from this. I'd love to hear some of your 11 stars. And then what are the things that are just above where we are today? What are those things, if you rated us as experience as a 4, what's the 5 and the 6? What are those things that are just within reach? Because that's your sweet spot typically. You may find that you've got some people who are fired up. You'll have like a technical guy sitting in the session. He'll be like thinking to himself, you guys think that's 10 star, but you know what? I'm going to go home and knock this out and surprise everybody. And like, that's not that hard. That's the kind of excitement you want to build through this exercise. So let's go ahead and start with this team. Tell us a little bit about the experience and maybe your reach for the star stuff, and then what are the things that are within reach. That's great. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing that. As you finish this session, as you're facilitating it, you're going to want to have these conversations, talk through next steps coming out of here are going to be, again, for your facilitation, will be make sure that it's documented. And try to come out of there with some things that people are like, we should go test that. Like, that's something we should go test now. Hopefully there's a few items that you can pull off the list. It's like, let's go do that now. Identify those roadblocks and challenges. What's stopping us from doing that? Well, you've got hopefully you've got some key leadership in participating in the session as well. They can help, again, they can take some of those roadblocks out of the way. To say, let me go take that. If you think that's the only thing that's holding you up from accomplishing this, I'll go do that. Or you have individuals who'll say, let me go talk to leadership and make sure we clear some of those roadblocks. What's the simplest way to validate it? We'll talk more about that in the second half. And then use this as a rallying cry. The documentation over time is something that, here's what we're going to accomplish, here's why we want to do this. We talked about prioritization. Some of those incremental things were great, but we rated this an 8 as a group, and that was a 6. So that's the beginning of a conversation about prioritization, which ideas are more important than others. We'll talk more about that in the second half, but it is time for a break. So I like to do what we call a stoke. This is, if any of you are familiar with the Stanford Design School, they use this term stoke. It's a way of like re-engaging after you've had a break. So your mind is, you're off now somewhere else. You've thought about the 11 star, you were fully engaged. Now it's a chance to come back. And in the creative space, often it's doing something a little bit outside of the norm. And so what I like to do is after a break, we do a quick stoke. And so what we're going to do is we'll do a found object bluff. This will be really fast. I'm going to take one individual from each of the tables. So you designate the person you think is your designated stoker. What you're going to do is you're going to take one found object, whether it's in your bag, on the table, whatever, and describe what it is. But don't describe what it really is. Describe what you imagine it to be. That's a found object stoke. A bluff. So I'm going to take this clicker here. This is actually, you've probably seen on Star Trek those tricorders. Scotty and Bones, they're using this tricorder. Well, this is actually this is a small destructive device. It's actually, in case this conference talk goes really poorly, there's this little green button which will basically destruct and end this conference talk very quickly. So that's really what this is about. This is a self-destruct device. So that's my example. You can do better than that. Find an object, somebody on the table, find an object, describe what it is, but not what it really is. Go. Who wants to go?
I'd love to.
All right, Stephen.
All right. So
lay it on us.
Take care. Where basically it is literally a top secret nuclear button that is bigger than both Korea and the U.S. president's button. Okay? And if I was to push it, what's going to happen is we actually have world peace.
There you go. Awesome. Who's up next? Go. So we're going to talk a little bit about innovation. I just put this up here for fun because we just finished the holidays, didn't we? How many of you guys had that Christmas dinner? You're like, no, I'm not going to eat that much this holiday season. No, I actually will. Let's talk a little bit about what is innovation. Think about in your organization, how would they define innovation? Maybe there's a group that's in charge of it. Maybe they expect everybody to be innovative. I don't know. Different companies approach innovation differently. How would your company describe innovation? And then does that differ from the way you would describe it? Here's my definition. There are lots of definitions. This is the one, I think for me, the key for when you're talking about innovation, and this is not just innovation, but a lot of different things, is getting that shared understanding of what the meaning is. So when I talk about this, when I talk about innovation, novel solutions that are brought to reality at the right time and in the right place. So novel, I think, covers some of my thinking around sort of it's got to be unique or something that in a way that people didn't expect in the past. That could be disruptive, but could just be wow, I'd never thought of applying that in this situation. Bringing it to reality is really important as well. Innovation that doesn't actually deliver is not really innovation. It's an interesting idea. The right time in the right place. I've seen fantastic ideas delivered at the wrong time in the wrong place. They're still great ideas, but they're not really considered innovative if they're not delivered in those. So we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to dive into the prioritization. And we're going to hopefully hit some of these elements of right time, right place, and novel solutions. So the tools we're going to talk about next will help us to sort of assess, are we at the right time, at the right place? Are we solving the right problems? So we've got some great ideas we've developed through the STAR exercise. We've got some good tools with the wishes and dreams to sort of get us there. This is some tools that I think will help us to be able to prioritize, is this the right thing we should be doing, and help to communicate that with the rest of the organization. So I actually have, as part of this presentation, I have a really, really great business idea. I actually gathered this business idea from a guy who has successfully launched 3 different businesses. He's a friend of mine. He's very, very successful. He's got lots of great ideas, fantastic business opportunity. And he gave me this idea as part of this. I said, hey, I'm doing this presentation about and talking about innovation. I'd love for this business. Can I share this business idea with this group? And he said, yeah, that's fine. Here you go. I'll give you this idea. But he says, I want something back for it. And so I agreed that we'll do some sort of an auction. So how much would you guys give me? Now, hopefully, I've shared with you a little bit of the provenance. I can guarantee you this is a solid business idea. It's a fantastic business opportunity. How much are you willing to pay me for that? Who wants to start the bidding?
1 Bitcoin.
1 Bitcoin? Others? Anybody? Some cold hard cash?
Wait, 3 businesses.
He's successful. 3 businesses. Basically, financially, he doesn't have to. I mean, he's got a strong record of actually.
You get him or her, or do you get
just the idea?
What are the businesses that he started?
Okay, these are good questions. We can get into that, but how much will you give me for the idea? Nothing. Ideas, yeah. Ideas are cheap, guys. Ideas are a dime a dozen. I don't really have an idea. I really don't have a business idea. There's a bit of a bluff here. But ideas are extremely cheap. Execution and the ability to execute is where the value lies. That's where, and so, as we talk about these ideas and concepts and what we go after and how we prioritize them, they have no value in and of themselves until there's some execution behind it. Let's talk about how we prioritize, and this will be important. This is based a lot on, if you've heard Clay Christensen's Jobs to be Done. If you've ever heard of that, he's a Harvard professor. It's interesting. He's not very well known. He's got a Utah connection. But Innovator's Dilemma has been probably his biggest success, most widely known. But the idea of jobs to be done, I'm surprised, has not been more widely adopted. People know about it, but there's no sort of widespread sort of deep understanding of this. So I want to walk through sort of this thinking of jobs to be done, and then we're going to talk about an algorithm that you can use to be able to, as a prioritization tool. This is the tool I want you to walk away with. But first, I think it's important that we start with, what is the user, what's the job to be done? What does the user really want? Don't get confused about how they do it. What's the outcome? So the classic example here is that nobody wants a drill. Everybody wants a hole. They want a hole. That's why they bought a drill. They're not thinking about how do I get, you can easily come up with how do you get there. Okay, we get a faster drill. You've heard the example of Ford. If you ask somebody what they wanted in a car, they'd want a faster horse and buggy. Like there's certain points where there's leaps forward. So focus on the outcome. What is it? What is the job that needs to be done here? For us at Asurion, the outcome is that people want their technology all the time. They want it all the time. They don't want to get insurance. They don't want to get a replacement. That's not what they want. They want their phone all the time. And so that's caused us many times to think about, how do we do that? We've had crazy ideas when doing the 11-star experience stuff where we said, could we just keep a duplicate of everybody that has insurance's phone so that we could immediately ship it out? It's like every night replicates and is just ready so that when their phone dies or whatever happens, we can get it to them. Stuff like that. They're thinking about I've had one guy, one of those truthsayers, say, we should just give everybody, when they buy insurance, a second phone that just sits in their drawer. And then when they need to file a claim, they just ship us back the old one, and they start their new one. It's sitting in the drawer ready to go. Like, that's the experience we want to deliver. Again, that, thinking through what's the outcome that people want causes you to think completely differently about how do we accomplish that. So the current solution, what is the user currently doing? So this is important too if you're moving into a new space, to really understand what is the job that people are trying to accomplish. They're currently doing something today to solve that. What are they doing today to accomplish that? So let's take the tech support. Everybody kind of laughed that they have older parents or individuals in their family who call them up and say, hey, I need some technical support. Currently that's what they're doing. And so to come up with a product that unseats that, you have to be better than calling up my son and getting him to give me the advice. Like the solution that we offer needs to actually do a better job than that. It needs to be more convenient. It needs to be potentially cheaper, which is hard when you're dealing with family and it's free. But you kind of think about, okay, there is a current solution that's in play. Very rarely are you going to come upon a problem that you then have to, this is a problem that people don't have, and this is a little bit like the smart home products. Like, nobody is waking up in the middle of the day saying, I need to just be able to tell my lights to turn on. They currently go and flip the switch, and that's good enough. And so the challenge is how do you convince people that it's worth spending hundreds of dollars doing all the technical setup and support to be able to do something that you currently can do by just walking over and flipping a switch? It's a big challenge, right? The opportunity cost is, how satisfied are people with the current solution? Let's take that light switch example. It works, right? I flip the switch, the lights turn on. It works pretty well. Now, if you're, physically disabled, and maybe it's a challenge to get to the light switch and turn it on or do other things with the electronic devices, hey, that voice is like gold, but that audience is very small. So you got to think about, okay, how satisfied are people with the current solution, and then how important is this product or feature? Turning on the lights, pretty important when it gets dark, but during the daytime, maybe not so important. So you've only got 12 hours a day where your product is important to people. These are all kind of considerations as you're thinking about it. The outcome is really what's important, and how important is that to them? So as you think about if you productize that, if you're trying to build a product or feature that solves for that outcome, how important is that to them? These are all kind of factors that play into, hey, we're going to build this new feature. So you've got your 11-star, you've identified some cool things you want to go do. Start wrapping around these questions. Start looking at it and assessing that. Go ahead.
The last question, how important, what are some ways that you have measured that? How do you deduct that?
Yeah, I think survey work, you can kind of start to say, you know, if you had to spend a certain amount to accomplish this task, what would you be willing to spend? If you had to expend a certain amount of effort, you're looking at what is their willingness to do this and how much are they willing to invest in it behaviorally. Opinions, I think, are valuable, so surveys are a good way to start, but then it's great to be able to move it to like behavior, and you can actually then start to observe and say, okay, how important is this feature? If we actually, you see this in like fake door tests. We'll put this feature out there. It's a button that says we have this capability, and we'll look at how many people click on it. And that gives us a sense of, by their action, they're telling us they're interested in this product. And that's a way of gauging importance to people. I've heard of, you know, some startups, they'll list features in their specs that they don't have. And then when people start pinging them saying, where's this feature? Then they go, oh, well, we better build that. It's a little bit crazy, but, you know, whatever gets you through the day. Yeah. I think that part of that goes to, and what this doesn't talk about, is do you have a target? Do you have a target audience, and how broad is that? And I think it's a good question for product teams to have, to say, hey, let's focus in on this particular segment. Then you can have discussions about how big is that segment, how many people, what's the opportunity. But those are good questions and good debates to have in a product team than not topic. I want to talk about what we call the opportunity algorithm. And this, I think, might help there. Because if you could do a survey of one, and this might be one, you know, this might come out a certain way. But ideally, most folks recognize when you start to get into mathematics, scale matters. Like, we want more than just one opinion. And again, this can be, ideally it's behavioral based, but you could do it based on opinion as well. And this is, I will tell you, I am not a math, like, you know, I'm a typical sort of design background. Math is not my forte. Over time, I've had to get much smarter about financial things and understanding of how the business works and how the business makes money. It's important. And in speaking in those terms, I've come to realize that there's some power in coming up with equations that can empower design and product teams. And this is one of those. I did not develop this. This is actually from Harvard professor who developed this opportunity algorithm. You can do a search, or I can provide some references, but if you do a search on Harvard opportunity algorithm, this will come up, and I can provide the original references as well. So this is a technique for being able to assess what is the opportunity and give a ranking to it. And we found this helpful in our conversations within our organization. As designers are able to speak in terms of here's what the opportunity is, whether it's a feature or a product, or it can be very granular or it can be very large. It just depends on what research you've done and how you feed it. But it can be helpful within an organization to say, if we're going to trade off, maybe you've got 10 things you've come up with from your 11-star experience that you want to go do. Okay, well, let's do a little bit of rigor around what's the opportunity, and we can rank order those, not just based on the opinion of the people in the room, but what our customers are telling us on those different opportunities. So importance, satisfaction, plus, importance minus satisfaction plus importance equals the opportunity. It's pretty simple. It's not a hard math. It's just, again, appealing for a lot of folks. It's pretty straightforward. And so you just do your assessment. You can do a assessment on feature. And again, when you're setting up your survey work, it could be usability research. And you kind of come up with, give us on a scale of 1 to 10. What is the how satisfied are with what you're currently doing today. If you're currently flipping the light switch, how satisfying is that on a scale of 1 to 10? How important is it to you to be able to do that? And then you extrapolate that out and say, okay, here's the opportunity for us and this feature if we do a better job with that. And you can apply it to a bunch of different features, and you do that comparison. Phrase your questions similarly, and just interpose the different features and different elements you can build. So here's an example. You got this one up here, feature A, comes out at 15.8. So you notice too here, they're currently really satisfied. The importance is the same on feature A and C. Their satisfaction, though, with C is really strong. So it's not worth us going after that. Let's go after the thing that they're not satisfied with. So, I think these tools work really well together. 11-star gets you these ideas, but then putting this opportunity algorithm on top of it helps you to be able to say, okay, which ones should we prioritize? Which ones should we go after first? So this is the opportunity algorithm. And that's the third tool I wanted to provide for you guys today. Any questions about this application? Yeah.
You might be able to just run us through an example to solidify this.
Yeah. Yeah, so let me think about a specific team example. So we've had some teams that have been working on, we call it, let me give you a little background. The team is called TV Severity. It's kind of a catchy name. Their portion of the experience that they're focused on is when someone needs a replacement television set. So we also do extended warranties through Walmart and Home Depot, et cetera. So if you bought a big screen TV and the TV needs a replacement, it stopped working and it's still under warranty. For these big TVs, the technology is changing so rapidly. By the time you file a claim on it a year later, it's almost, the value is considerably less than what it was. What we found is that it's typically not worth repairing those larger TVs. It's not worth sending somebody out to fix it. The parts are too expensive. We do replacement most of the time. With a larger television set, is just and for a long time we were doing we'll cut you a check. Here's what its current value is. It's declined in value, but we'll cut you a check for what it's currently worth. We were sending out a lot of checks to people for broken television sets, and then they'd go and who knows what. Maybe they'd spend it on something else. So the TV Severity team was around, hey, can we stop sending as much cash out and get people into devices replacement devices. And so we worked with our partners, like Walmart, et cetera, and said, can we look at the current television sets that are up to date, and can you give us a good pricing on it and offer that instead of cash back? Say, we can get you, and for most people that's pretty good because they're getting a better television than what they bought 6-9 months ago. The technology's gotten better. So this team has been focused on that. That's their challenge. And so they came up with an entire matrix of how do we put those offers in front of the customer, explain what they're going to get, almost a little bit of a shopping experience, like, okay, it's got these features, yeah, I want that, and then it gets shipped out from the vendor to them, and they get a new device, rather than sending a check. And those margins save the company millions of dollars in the year. So that's the backstory. That team was tasked with, okay, what do we go after first? We can work on the vendor relationships and getting better devices. We can work on the UI for the customer and helping them to come up with which device to choose. We could work on our current process of saying, can we do gift vouchers? Could we do vouchers that would then to the vendor, then we don't have to build the UI. They can just go and buy it. But we know that they're at least spending the money where we give them a gift voucher. So when they started, that's the scope of, they had all those opportunities in front of them. They could go any which direction they wanted to go. So they did some initial research around how satisfied would people be with, the check that they currently get. How satisfied and how important is it then for them to get a new television set? How important was it for them to get something from the same vendor or from a different vendor? And so they did that same sort of assessment, and they looked at, okay, we could go these different directions. We could work on building UI, we could work on with the vendor, we could go this direction, and they got the feedback from the customers that they did want a new television. Most of the people were not going to go spend the money on something else, and they would really love the convenience of getting a better television than they currently had at no cost to them. Because if we send them an e-card and they go to the vendor, they're going to have to pay full retail. And we're able to get them wholesale pricing on it. And in fact, most of the time, there's no cost at all. It just comes right to you. So that's how that team used this as a tool to be able to say, what should we go after? And it was through working with their customers and getting their level of satisfaction and how important it was for them to do these things, that they were able to sort of come up with the metrics to, like, this is what we should go after. And they ended up building the UI where customers can choose the devices, and then it just gets shipped to them. And it's worked really well for that team.
Out of curiosity, what methods of research did they use? Surveys?
Yeah, so they did mostly survey of existing customers, of customers who have recently just gone through the experience, and they looked at, we didn't have a UI solution to offer, so they had a prototype, and they did usability testing on the prototype, and then they did survey work on the people who are currently getting the e-cards or the checks, and just how happy were they with that, and if we had another solution, how would that be, what their opinion, would that be better? So that combination, it was a combination of survey and usability with a prototype. Yeah?
These features, are they proposed or desired features, or things that currently exist? And in the same vein, is the satisfaction about current satisfaction or about satisfaction if they were to get?
Yeah. In the example I shared, it was a combination. There was some features that we hadn't built yet, and there were some that we are currently offering. We looked at current things we could improve our current experience. There's always opportunities to refine and improve your current process, and then there's things that you haven't built yet. And the trick is, I think the challenge there is, and I don't know that we've nailed this, there is a bias toward building something new, right? The possibility of something new you kind of have to watch that it doesn't skew the numbers. If you're getting purely opinion, people are going to skew toward, I want something better, newer, that's not here yet. So I think you have to watch for that. And I think that's just something we're just watching and making sure that we're not biased toward it.
How do you define the difference between importance and satisfaction?
So satisfaction, I think, has to do with if you had this experience, how pleased would you be with it? Importance is, regardless of whether I have an experience or not, this is an important thing for me to have accomplished. So regardless of whether you have a solution or not, it's important for me to have a television set or be able to turn the light switches on and off. That's important to me. And there's a bunch of different ways we can solve that, and that's where satisfaction comes in. I'm satisfied more with this approach than that approach. Question. So if your feature is all trying to accomplish the same thing, right? If you've got 3 different approaches, the example I gave was 3 different approaches to solve the same problem, the opportunity would likely be the same because that's your outcome. You may be looking across features, though, that are different outcomes. So we may say, okay, let's take your 11-star, food, transportation, communication, those are different outcomes. And those outcomes may change your approach. You may say, okay, here's our solution. How satisfied are people with the current solution in place? They're not very satisfied. The opportunity is really high for this one. So the example I gave was the opportunity is the same. So those numbers would all be the same. I'm sorry, the satisfaction are the same, but it may not be. You may be looking across your product and saying, we could go do a bunch of different things that solve different problems for the customer. So let's see if we can do a straw poll. This is completely on the fly. So we'll do a straw poll. How we think of 3 opportunities that we identified as part of this 11-star?
Food.
Outcome is food.
Food, Wi-Fi, travel.
What was it? Food, Wi-Fi, travel.
Yeah,
I think those are good. Okay. Okay, food, location, transportation. Wi-Fi got lost, sorry. Okay. I'm going to put these. I think I'll just put them right here. Okay. So 1 to 10, where would you say, how important is the location to having a great conference experience? 8? Consensus?
Sure, yeah.
You could.
If we were designing a new conference.
So that's the importance of it. How satisfied are you with the current, where we are now, this conference? How satisfied are you with?
Current satisfaction.
I think that was the part that, not that we have to.
Yeah. Let's just say, okay, let's just say that's 9. Now now I want to switch this. Food. How important is the food at a conference? How important is it to you? This is if we could do a survey, we would come up with our average, and we would.
Is food available or is food provided? Right?
Yeah.
If it's not provided, I need to have access.
I'm going to just, for illustration's sake, let's say 7. Okay. Now, satisfaction. Now, let's talk about, this is where I would have, say, a prototype. I'd say, okay, what we're going to have for lunch today is bread bowl with soup. And if I could have an illustration here in front of you to show you, here's what it's going to look like. Here's what it's made with. Here's the chef that put it together. You have not experienced it yet. You have not eaten it yet. What is I'm going to prototype it for you, though. And if you're doing software, you might walk them through usability of trying to use this. It's not built yet. They don't have a mass number of folks who have used it. How satisfied are you guys with that? And you would rate that experience. So that's an example of I can't say how I'm currently satisfied, but I'm using a proxy of a prototype or some sort of way of getting them a vision of here's what I can provide for you. How satisfied would you be with that? And that's where you come up with your satisfaction score. And that's the illustration between what you currently, it's easy to survey what you currently, but then you can also do it with things that you haven't yet built. And again, that's where I talked about there is a bias toward the build because your small sample, you're not going to be able to survey as many people as you do with your current product. And people tend to like sort of the new on the cusp. And you would hope that you're building something that's better than current today. So there is a bias toward build. And I'll admit that. You need to watch it. You just have to, I don't know of any way to build it out. And if you guys have ideas on how to filter out that bias, I'd love to hear it. I don't know any other way than scale. And to scale, it gets beyond prototype. And that's where the dilemma lies. But I think we can recognize there is a bias there. And we need to say that it's substantially better than our current, the other features that were based on current reality, that we should go do this. So, you know, it's not a perfect system, but you just watch for that. Yeah. Yeah, and you know, there's opportunity costs within an organization too, where you kind of have to say, you know, how is the right timing within the organization for us to build this new feature? You know, so there's other factors that play into this, but it does provide you with some sort of numbers, some sort of system that you can put some logic behind it, which I've seen continually product teams and designers in particular struggle with. How do we prioritize? And can we give a sense that we are logically thinking through this? That there's not just, you know, whatever happens to whim of fancy today. So to that end, I think this is a helpful tool to be able to speak to your teams in terms of here's how we're rating these things. Here's how we're evaluating the approach we're taking. Not perfect, but it starts to move us towards something that at least folks in the organization can get behind and say, okay, they're not just going on a whim of what they think is important. I did want to point out, for us, what I've found is that quantifying the opportunity is the first step in understanding what are the risks to the product success if we don't hit these. From a user acceptance, the user's willingness to actually embrace and utilize this new product, this new feature that we're developing, quantifying it is a first step. And it's not just the quantification of it and the work there, it's the getting everybody on the team to recognize prioritization and why we're making these priority decisions. That's powerful. Because if people are working in this vacuum where they don't feel like prioritization is made based on some sort of logic, that it's just on the whim, that's not a healthy place for an organization to be in, and it doesn't last long. There's, you know, a lot of folks believe they're Steve Jobs. Not a lot of people are Steve Jobs. The final thing, final tool I wanted to, it's not so much of a tool, but it's this idea of riskiest assessment testing. That's the RAT. We talked about the dreams. We talked about the stars. Here's the RAT. Understanding what's worth losing and what's not. So this is not so much of a standalone tool as this idea that around what do we need to build in order to test this? What's the minimal thing we can possibly build in order to test this? And having that conversation within our journey teams and these small squads has been really, really helpful. To be able to challenge people to say, how can we test, what's the way we can test the risks that we have in this product launch? And what's the least amount of effort we can do to make that happen? And a lot of times we've found the simplest thing to do is actually looking at current products to solve this problem and maybe lightly rebranding them and then launching them and see how they perform. Maybe adding a little bit of different context or information with an existing product, someone else's product. We have a portion of our company that out in the Bay Area who's been working on home security systems. And their first product launch was literally a reboxing of a competitor's hardware. They reboxed it, re-messaged it, how it was launched, and they wanted to get that feedback on what works, what doesn't work, and that was the simplest way that they could get that information to learn how the product works and what features they needed to build was to literally rebrand the competitor's product, put it in the market, not for long term, but highly tailored experiences and get feedback on that. To me, that was novel. Like I had never thought of that. I always thought, we've got to own this, we've got to build this, this is us. And they were able to get something out, within weeks. It's, fairly simple branding, and create a website and get a few and do some advertising to be able to get that kind of user feedback. So riskiest assessment testing is beyond just that. It can be it goes a little bit back to the thing we talked about at the very beginning. What are those challenges we might face? What are the risks to this product launch? What would cause us to not be successful? And how can we test that? How can we get rid of those risks in the product launch? A lot of times in a design sprint, we talk about assumptions. We do an assumption evaluation. What are the assumptions we have? And I'm always surprised. You've been sitting in a design sprint for a week. We'll do this typically on the third day. So, been sitting in the room together 3 days, saying, okay, here's the product we're going to go build tomorrow. We're going to prototype. And people are like, what are the assumptions we've made? And inevitably, people will be like, well, I assume that this is gonna happen. And everyone else will go, what? No, that's not what we're building tomorrow. That's And so there's this communication. I think this is a healthy conversation to have within your teams as you're going through this process of discovery is, what are the assumptions we make? And what are the risks if we get that wrong? What happens if we think that people are going to be using this on a desktop, and no, actually they're using it on mobile, or vice versa? What happens in that situation? Oh, we haven't thought about that. We thought everybody was doing that. You think that's fairly common today to think about mobile versus desktop, but we design interfaces for our call center agents. Desktop, right? Well, we have some work-at-home agents, and they actually might be using their tablet. Oh, well, we didn't know that. That was an assumption that was made. So that's a risk. That's a big risk. Have we done an evaluation? So this RAT is this idea of what are the biggest risks that we have in this product launch, and how do we mitigate that? How do we plan for that? What's the smallest possible way to test our improved product design conference idea? So you think about, we're going to jump ahead, and let's just say that you have gone through and you've done your opportunity algorithm, you've figured out one feature here that you want to go build, or one element of this conference experience you want to build. What's the smallest possible way to test that? Think about that for a minute. Let's put it into practice. So as a table, you guys pick one. We're not going to, you could probably don't have time to do the opportunity algorithm to say which one's the right one to go after. Let's just pick one. You think, okay, this is an interesting feature. And I'd love for you to spend a little bit of time to say, how would we put that into practice? Can you use the riskiest assessment and opportunity algorithm, or to say how can we test that? How can we validate that? What are the risks? List as many of them out as you possibly can. And we're going to try to use WAP to do that. What's the positive effect it would have if we did that right? More than one is great. What could stand in the way of you being successful? And how do you mitigate those challenges? Thank you for this. This has been a great exercise. I wanted to just finish up here. I know all this talk about food, we're getting near lunch, so recognize. So just got one more area, not so much of a tool as with all of these techniques we talked about today, all these different tools that you could use, there's this idea of bringing others along with you. It's not enough for you individually to come away with the knowledge and the expertise. It's a team effort. I have a great mentor who loves to quote this to me. He's like, Jay, it's been created 2 times, once in your mind and then once in reality. I get this all the time, so it's definitely on the tip of my mind all the time. And I think about this as in terms of the knowledge of prioritization, the 11-star experience, all of these things. A lot of this is an exercise in the mind, but it's important that we do that in order for it to be able to then go forward and create it in reality. And I think it's also really important as you think about teams, whether you're on one of these new dedicated focus teams or whether you're working on a traditional distributed team, it's important that we bring other folks along in this process. So we've talked a lot today about facilitation, of how would you run these sessions, how would you use these tools in your practice. I think that's really important because you need to help others that you're working with to have those experiences. The 11-star is great because people have started to imagine now, what is that experience like for our customers? You've gotten them a little bit out of their day-to-day think, and how do you get them to a new way of thinking? Or if you've started to assess value and opportunity, then they're starting to say, oh, I hadn't thought about things that way. I think I didn't want to finish today's session without saying, hey, you've got some new knowledge, but really the value here is with you bringing along the others on your team, that you help them to have those experiences, to have that forethought themselves. I wanted to talk, I think there's also an important element of we talked about some of the risks, about facing reality. I think product and design can be catalysts within an organization to help individuals say, what are the challenges? Let's face those things. What are the risks? What are our customers' real feelings about the product? I think I'm a realist here. You don't want to be like Debbie Downer of the organization saying, hey, it's not as rosy as we think it is. I think you need to temper that. But at the same time, there is a value in bringing forth within your sphere of influence, hey, here are some of the challenges we face, but then also coming with solutions or potential solutions to those challenges. Helping your team face reality is not all about just calling out the ugliness. It's also about coming forward with recommendations on how we might improve that. Ultimately design is still about problem solving. I really believe that. Whether you've got design in your title or not, the process of creating a solution is a design process. I often joke around. Sometimes I'll meet with organizations who say, yeah, we don't have any design. We don't have design in our organization. It's becoming rarer. Design is becoming more ubiquitous, but there's still organizations out there, we don't have design. And I often will say, you do. You do have design. It just happens to be being done by your programmers or your business analysts. They are designing your product, whether you believe it or not. Someone is creating the experience that your customers are interacting with, and those folks are designing, whether they've got design in their title or not. So, solving problems just can't be, it still remains important. I want to talk about, I'm going to go back to the cycling reference here. Arvid is a long-distance cyclist from Canada. He's of Polish descent. He actually is a first generation. His parents are from Poland, but he was raised in South America before it's kind of an interesting way that they got to Canada. He is this long-distance cyclist. For a time, he held the Guinness Book of World Record for the fastest time across Canada on a bicycle. He's done it multiple times, a lot of times. he wrote this book called When Quitting is Not an Option. And he talks about some of his long-distance cycling events where, just doing some really, really interesting and amazing things. He actually rode across Canada once with a cargo bike that had a seat on the front. So it was like a tandem, but the person in front was not pedaling. And it was, he was raising funds for an orphanage in Kenya. And he had some of these orphans come over, and they had a motorhome, but they got to experience Canada, world outside of their own experience. Anyway, just really interesting guy, and way he really tries to raise awareness and funds for different causes that he believes in. He has this quote, and I think it's really applicable, particularly to obviously in the context of what he does, it's very applicable, but it's also, I think, applicable for sometimes within a product design organization. When you're talking about these 11-star experiences, it's not immediately clear how we're going to get there. We don't know how we're going to get there. Often it's easy to just say, this is not successful. We just can't do it. We need to go do something else. I think it's important, as a leader, I try to infuse into my teams this idea that we may not see how we're going to accomplish it, but it's worth going after. And only after we've taken a stab at it and we then realize, have more data, more understanding, then it's okay to say, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go a different direction. But just because we don't know how we're going to accomplish it does not mean you shouldn't go for it. You should, striving for things that are unclear and not necessarily, there's no clear path to, is not a recipe for failure. I've seen that time and time again. And sometimes it means you have to take a smaller scope, or maybe it's a side effort. It's maybe not your main focus. But I've seen time and time again passionate individuals who are able to accomplish amazing things within organizations, as long as they're given that mandate that you can do this. I'm not going to stop you from accomplishing that. So I wanted to put that out there. We talked about a lot of risks, and we talked about opportunities. Sometimes there's things that people are just passionate about, and there's no clear line of how it's going to be accomplished. Foster that. Encourage that. Help them to face reality of, hey, there's some challenges you might face. But I would say don't stop those folks from accomplishing that. As you move into your teams or as you move into leadership, it's important. Dreaming, puts you on the defense alone. Dreaming alone puts you on the defense. Mental contrasting puts you on the offense. So this idea of, hey, I've thought through all the problems. Here's what I'm going to go do to try to accomplish it. Even if I don't know all of the problems, you're in a space ready to accomplish. So, the wish, outcome, obstacle, plan, what if, the WIFM. Wait a minute, I'm going the wrong direction. Okay, sorry. I want to tie it all together. So I had a slide out of order there. All the things we've learned about today. So here's my takeaways. Harness the power of dreams by giving them context and value. Give them some sort of context and value, and then people can actually then start to act on it. We talked about motivation is a great catalyst to get started, but it's not going to carry you through to the end. Understanding its context and value and what are the challenges is key there. Constantly assess the risks and make them powerless. Constantly be assessing what are the challenges, what are the risks, what can get in our way. It's counterintuitive, I know, because you think positive thinking. Hey, we got to think about the positive. No, the pessimists are the ones who are able to meet the challenges of the day and overcome them. Just don't let it sour you. Share freely and bring others along with you. There's power in this. I'm a big believer in, we live in a society that's very individualistic, and it's all about the power of one, and you can do whatever you want, and that's great. But I'm a believer in society and in groups of people. When they band together, and they can accomplish things that individuals alone cannot. And so I would say to you, as you put these tools into practice, as you work on these individual teams, bring others along with you. The more you have in your band, the more likely you are to accomplish it. So the three tools, the wish, objectives, obstacles, and plans, that's the dreams, opportunity algorithm, and the stars, the 11-star, riskiest assumption testing. Hopefully these are all tools that you can now have at your disposal. One more challenge and one more opportunity for you. I'd like for you, if you're willing, I've done this at a couple other conferences, I'd like for you to find a pair up. Could be the same person you met with this morning, could be somebody else. Identify 2 takeaways from today's session. What are 2 things that you're like, these are my key takeaways? And if you're willing, discuss how you're going to put those things into practice and how you might follow up with one another. Maybe reconnect with one another after the conference and say, after a certain period of time, have you been able to do that? Were you able to put it into practice? And feel free to ping me. I'll put a message in Slack probably in a month or 2 and say, hey, have you been able to put any of these tools we talked about into practice? I'd love to hear about it. Come back here into Slack. Put those messages here. I'd love to hear how you've been able to use it, maybe challenges you've run into or lessons you've learned. All right, 5 minutes. Hopefully you got some good takeaways from today's session, things that you feel like you can apply. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'd love to hear from you. Things, I know they're going to do a survey as part of the conference, but feel free to reach out to me directly. Love to hear about how you're able to apply some of these things, if you're able to, if you modify, if you change, if you approach it differently. Love to hear about that. Please feel free to reach out to me directly. Typically, you can find me most places on the web, QuadMod. Most networking tools and Slack, I'm available. Thank you for the participation. Thank you for the great ideas and for the feedback. I really appreciate it. It's been a great discussion. I hope you get something out of this and you can apply to your teams. And like I said, love to hear about it. And have a great rest of your conference.